Part 1. The Mercy of the Valen. The stars had never looked so close. Captain Han Junho stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Dawn, watching the impossible sight through the viewing screen. They had done it. Humanity had finally broken free from the solar system and traveled faster than light. The year was 2157, and this moment would change everything. "All systems are stable, Captain," said Kang Mirai from her station. She was the ship's communication specialist and language expert, though right now there was nobody to talk to except each other. The crew of 42 had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never return. But the journey had been smooth so far. Too smooth, perhaps. Junho checked their position. They were near a yellow star system, far from Earth. The experimental drive had worked perfectly. He allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had finally joined the stars, then the alarm screamed. "Contact! Unknown vessel approaching fast!" shouted the tactical officer. His hands flew across his console, but the readings made no sense. The ship that appeared on their sensors was massive, far larger than anything humanity had ever built, and it was moving toward them at incredible speed. "Attempt communication on all frequencies," Junho ordered, keeping his voice steady even as his heart pounded. This was first contact. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries, but his instincts told him something was wrong. The alien ship appeared on the viewing screen and several crew members gasped. It was beautiful and terrible at once. The vessel looked like a blade made of dark metal and purple light, covered in symbols that seemed to glow and shift. It was at least 10 times larger than the Prometheus Dawn. "They're scanning us," Mirai reported, her voice tight with tension. "Very thorough scans. Captain, they're reading everything about our ship, our technology, even our biological signatures." Junho nodded slowly. He understood what this meant. The aliens were studying them like a scientist might study a new insect. The question was, what would they do next? The answer came quickly. Weapons ports opened along the alien ship's hull. Energy began to gather at multiple points, visible even through the screen. The Prometheus Dawn's primitive sensors could barely register the power levels. One shot from those weapons would vaporize them instantly. "Shields up," Junho ordered, even though he knew their shields would be useless. "And continue broadcasting on all frequencies. Let them know we mean no harm." Mirai worked frantically at her station. She sent out mathematical sequences, prime numbers, images of Earth and humanity. She transmitted music, art, everything she could think of that might show they were intelligent and peaceful. But there was no response from the alien ship. The weapons charged higher. Junho could see the glow intensifying. He gripped his chair and thought of Earth, of the billions of people who would never know what happened here. Humanity's first journey to the stars would be its last. Then something unexpected happened. The weapons powered down. On the viewing screen, a face appeared. It was alien but somehow familiar. The being had features that suggested great age and wisdom. Its skin was pale blue with darker patterns, and its eyes were large and golden. It wore what looked like military armor decorated with medals and symbols of rank. "I am War Shepherd Thalrin of the Valen Empire," the alien said. The translation came through garbled at first, but Mirai quickly adjusted their systems. "You have entered our territory. By law, you should be destroyed immediately." Junho stood up slowly, making sure his movements were non-threatening. "I am Captain Han Junho of Earth. We meant no intrusion. This is our first journey beyond our home system. We didn't know this space belonged to anyone." Thalrin studied him for a long moment. "First journey? You are that young?" Something flickered in those golden eyes. Surprise perhaps, or curiosity. "Your technology is primitive. Your ship would be no match for even our oldest vessels. Why did your people send you out so unprepared?" "Because we had to try," Mirai said, stepping forward before Junho could stop her. "We had to know what was out here. We had to reach for the stars, even if it meant danger. That's what we are. That's what humanity is." The Valen commander tilted his head, a gesture that seemed almost human. "You speak with courage for one about to die." But there was no cruelty in his voice. He sounded almost sad. "If we must die, we die," Junho said. "But before you destroy us, please know that we came in peace. We have no wish to harm anyone. We only wanted to explore and learn and perhaps meet others like ourselves." Thalrin was silent for a long time. His golden eyes moved across the screen as if he could see into their ship, into their hearts. The crew of the Prometheus Dawn waited, barely breathing. "I have been a warrior for 200 of your years," Thalrin said finally. "I have conquered 17 species for my empire. I have destroyed countless ships and ended civilizations that threatened the Valen. This is what I am. This is my duty." He paused, and something changed in his expression. "But I have never encountered a species so young, so innocent, so full of hope. You remind me of what my own people were long ago, before we became conquerors." "Then let us live," Mireille pleaded. "Give humanity a chance to grow, to learn, to become something good in this galaxy." "If I let you live, you may one day become a threat to my empire," Thalren said. "You may return with weapons and fleets and wage war against us. This is why young species are eliminated. This is the way of the galaxy. Or we might become your friends," Junho said. "We might be grateful for your mercy and remember it always. We might choose peace over war because you showed us that peace was possible." Another long silence. The Valen commander's hands moved across controls they could not see. The crew of the Prometheus Dawn prepared themselves for death. But Thalren surprised them all. "I am old," he said quietly. "I am tired of being a destroyer. Perhaps just once I can choose to be something else." He looked directly at Junho. "I am sending you star charts and navigational data. This will show you safe routes back to your home and warn you of dangerous territories. You will leave this space immediately and tell your people to avoid Valen territory until you are stronger." "We will," Junho promised, hardly daring to believe what was happening. "I swear to you, we will remember this. We will remember your mercy." "Grow strong, young ones," Thalren said. "The galaxy is not kind. You will face many dangers. But perhaps you will survive and become something worthy of the gift I give you today." The screen flickered. "Go now, before I change my mind or before my superiors question my decision." The connection ended. Data flooded into the Prometheus Dawn's computers, more information than humanity had ever possessed about deep space. And the massive Valen warship turned away, disappearing into faster-than-light travel as quickly as it had appeared. Junho collapsed into his chair, shaking with relief and wonder. Around him the crew embraced and cried and laughed. They were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. "Set course for Earth," Junho ordered when he could speak again. "And Mireille, make sure every word of this encounter is recorded. Every detail. The name Thalren must never be forgotten." The Prometheus Dawn turned toward home, carrying the greatest story humanity had ever known. They had met the aliens. They had faced death, and they had been spared by a warrior who chose mercy over duty. Thalren's name would echo through history. But nobody aboard that ship, not even Junho himself, could have imagined just how far that echo would reach. The journey home took weeks, and every day Junho thought about the Valen commander. What had made him spare them? What would happen to him when his superiors learned of his decision? Would they punish him for showing mercy? When Earth finally appeared on their screens, the entire crew wept with joy. They had survived. They had returned. And they brought with them the most precious gift imaginable. Proof that humanity was not alone, and hope that the universe might contain more than just danger. The Prometheus Dawn entered Earth's orbit to a hero's welcome. But Junho knew the real hero was light years away, a Valen warrior who had chosen kindness over conquest. "We owe him everything," Junho said to Mireille as they prepared to land. "One day somehow we must repay this debt." "We will," Mireille promised. Humanity never forgets. She had no idea how true those words would prove to be. Part 2. The fall of the Valen. 75 years had passed since the Prometheus Dawn returned to Earth. Humanity had changed in ways the original crew could scarcely have imagined. Following the star charts given by Thalren, humans had established colonies on 17 worlds. They had built fleets of ships, proper warships, and explorers both. They had met other alien species and earned their cautious respect through trade and diplomacy. Premier Lee Deho stood in the command center of the United Earth Council, looking at reports from across human space. At 60 years old, he had spent his entire adult life building humanity's place among the stars. He had always remembered the story of Thalren, told to every child in every school, the Valen warrior who spared humanity when he could have destroyed them. "Sir, we're receiving strange signals," said Intelligence Officer Yun Sola, pulling him from his thoughts. She was young but brilliant, the best analyst in the fleet. "They're coming from Valen space. Distress calls, I think, but badly damaged." Deho moved to her station quickly. "Can you clean them up?" Sola worked her console with practiced skill. Slowly, the signals became clearer. What they revealed made Deho's blood run cold. The Valen Empire was under attack, not from a rival power but from something called the Kreshnar Swarm. The report spoke of entire worlds consumed, fleets destroyed, billions dead. The messages grew more desperate with each translation. The Valen were dying. "Get me Admiral Park Hyunwoo immediately," Daeho ordered. Admiral Park was humanity's finest military commander. He had fought pirates, negotiated with hostile aliens, and kept human space safe for 20 years. When he appeared on the screen, his lined face was grim. He had already seen the reports. "It's bad," Hyunwoo said without preamble. "The Kreshnar are a hive mind species. They consume everything in their path, break it down, use it to grow stronger. They've been sweeping through the outer sectors for years, but nobody thought they'd hit the Valen. The Valen Empire was supposed to be invincible." "How long do the Valen have?" Daeho asked. "Weeks at most. Maybe days. The Kreshnar are surrounding their core worlds. Once those fall, the Valen are extinct." Hyunwoo paused. "Sir, I know what you're thinking, but we can't help them. The Kreshnar are too powerful. They've destroyed civilizations far stronger than us. If we intervene, we'll die too." Daeho nodded slowly. He understood the Admiral's logic. It made perfect sense. Humanity had no reason to throw away everything they had built for an empire that had once considered destroying them. 75 years was a long time. The debt, if there ever was one, had been paid through humanity's survival and growth, but he couldn't forget the story. Couldn't forget that without Thalrin's mercy, none of them would exist. "Call an emergency session of the council," Daeho said. "Let them decide." The debate lasted for hours. The council chamber filled with voices, some angry, some afraid, all struggling with an impossible choice. Many argued that humanity owed nothing to the Valen. The Empire had been conquerors who happened to spare one ship. That wasn't enough to justify risking extinction. Others pointed out that humanity was still weak compared to the Kreshnar. Intervening would be suicide. Better to fortify human space and hope the swarm never turned their direction. Then Captain Cho Dabin entered the chamber. She was the granddaughter of Han Junho, the captain who had met Thalrin all those years ago. She commanded the flagship of humanity's fleet, a vessel named Thalrin's Gift in honor of the Valen warrior. She was young for a captain, only 35, but she had earned her position through skill and courage. Dabin stood before the council, still wearing her uniform from a patrol mission. "I've listened to all the arguments," she said, her voice clear and strong. "And I understand the fear. The Kreshnar are terrifying. We might die if we fight them. But I want to ask you all a simple question. Who are we?" The chamber fell silent. 75 years ago, my grandfather and his crew were about to die, Dabin continued. They were helpless. They had nothing to offer. They could only plead for mercy from a warrior who had every reason and right to destroy them. And that warrior, Thalrin, chose kindness over duty. He gave humanity a future. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of the council members. Every person in this room, everyone on Earth and all our colonies exists because one alien decided that mercy was more important than following orders. We owe him everything. We owe the Valen everything. If we don't answer their call now when they're facing extinction, then who are we? What does our survival mean if we abandon those who gave it to us? The Valen were conquerors, someone argued. They destroyed 17 species. Yes, Dabin agreed. And Thalrin was part of that. He told my grandfather as much. But when it mattered, when he faced a choice between destruction and mercy, he chose mercy. That one choice defined him more than 200 years of war. Don't we owe him the same consideration? Don't we owe the Valen a chance to be more than their past? Premier Daeho watched the faces around the chamber. He could see the conflict, the fear, but also something else. Pride, hope, the understanding that this moment would define what humanity truly was. All in favor of sending military aid to the Valen? Daeho said quietly. Raise your hands, the vote was close. Many hands stayed down and Daeho couldn't blame them. But when the count was finished, the motion had passed. Humanity would intervene. Admiral Hyunwoo took a deep breath when he received the order. Then we'd better move fast, he said. And we'll need every ship we can spare. The mobilization was incredible. Within 48 hours, humanity assembled the largest fleet in its history. 117 warships from massive carriers to small fast attack vessels. 20,000 crew members, all volunteers who knew they might never return. Captain Dabin stood on the bridge of Thalrin's Gift as the fleet prepared to depart. Around her, the crew moved with quiet efficiency. They were afraid, but they were also determined. This was right. This was who humanity chose to be. All ships report ready, her tactical officer reported. Dabin nodded. Send a message to the fleet. Tell them we go to repay an old debt. Tell them we go to save the ones who saved us. Tell them that today humanity keeps its promises. The fleet jumped to faster-than-light travel, heading toward Valen space at maximum speed. They had no idea what they would find when they arrived. They didn't know if they would survive. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. Thalrin had spared humanity once. Now humanity would return the favor, no matter the cost. As the stars blurred past the viewing screens, Dabin thought of her grandfather's stories. She thought of the Valen warrior who chose mercy over duty, and she hoped desperately that they would arrive in time. Behind them, Earth waited in fear and pride. Ahead, the Valen Empire burned under the endless assault of the Kreshnar swarm, and between them, humanity's fleet raced forward carrying hope and gratitude across the stars. The journey took 3 days at maximum speed. Every hour brought new reports of Valen worlds falling, of desperate last stands of an empire in its death throes. The crew of the human fleet prepared themselves mentally and physically. They drilled constantly, checked weapon systems, and wrote letters home that might never be delivered. Yun Sola, who had joined the fleet as chief intelligence officer, worked around the clock analyzing Kreshnar tactics. The swarm was unlike any enemy humanity had faced. It learned quickly, adapted faster, and never stopped coming. Traditional military strategies wouldn't work against them. We need to be creative, she told Admiral Hyunwoo during a strategy session. The Kreshnar are powerful, but they rely on their hive mind coordination. If we can disrupt that communication even briefly, we might have a chance. Hyunwoo studied her plans and nodded slowly. It's risky, but everything about this mission is risky. Prepare the disruption weapons. We'll use them when the moment is right. On the third day, the fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Valen Prime system. What they saw made even the bravest crew members fall silent with horror. The Valen homeworld was surrounded. Massive Kreshnar bioships looking like tumors of flesh and metal covered the orbital space. They were actively consuming the outer moons, breaking them down into raw materials. The once mighty Valen fleet was reduced to scattered groups of ships making hopeless defensive stands. Incoming transmission, the communications officer said. It's from the Valen defenders. A face appeared on the screen. The Valen warrior looked exhausted, his armor damaged, his golden eyes filled with desperation and confusion. Unknown fleet, identify yourselves. If you're here to watch us die, leave now. We won't provide you that entertainment. Admiral Hyunwoo stepped forward. This is Admiral Park Hyunwoo of the United Earth Fleet. We're here to help. The Valen warrior stared at him in disbelief. Earth? The primitives The ones that Thalrin... He couldn't finish the sentence. Yes, Hyunwoo said simply. The ones he spared. We've come to return the favor. Now tell me where you need us most and let's save your homeworld together. For the first time in weeks, something like hope appeared in the Valen warrior's eyes. Part 3. The Human Armada. The battle for Valen Prime began within minutes of the human fleet's arrival. Admiral Park Hyunwoo had no time for elaborate planning or careful strategy. The Kreshnar swarm was already crushing the last defenders and every second counted. All ships attack pattern Delta, Hyunwoo ordered from his command ship. Focus fire on the bioships closest to the planet. We need to break their siege line. The human fleet surged forward. Their weapons might have been less powerful than the Valens, but they had numbers and determination. Missiles and energy beams lanced through space, striking the grotesque Kreshnar vessels. The bioships were massive things that looked like tumors mixed with machines, covered in organic plating that rippled and healed even as it was damaged. The Kreshnar responded immediately. Smaller attack organisms launched from the bioships like spores from a fungus. These creatures were living weapons, each one controlled by the hive mind. They swarmed toward the human fleet in their thousands. Deploying drone screen, reported Captain Cho Dabin from Thalrin's gift. She had been preparing for this moment during the entire journey. The drones were simple, cheap, and numerous. They created a moving wall of metal and explosives between the fleet and the Kreshnar organisms. When the swarm hit them, the explosions lit up space like a new sun. But it wasn't enough. The Kreshnar kept coming. For every organism destroyed, 2 more appeared. The human ships began taking damage. Hull breaches reported across the fleet. Casualties mounting. This isn't working, muttered Hyunwoo, watching the tactical display with growing frustration. We need to change tactics. Get me Intelligence Officer Yoon Sola. Sola appeared on his screen, her face illuminated by the glow of her console. Admiral, I've been monitoring the Kreshnar coordination signals. They pulse every 90 seconds, synchronizing the entire swarm. If we can hit them with the disruption weapons during that pulse, we might scatter them temporarily. How temporarily? Maybe 5 minutes. Maybe less. That'll have to be enough. Hyunwoo switched to fleet-wide communications. All ships with disruption weapons prepare to fire on my mark. Everyone else get ready to push hard the moment the Kreshnar falter. We're going to punch through their line and link up with the Valen defenders. He watched the countdown. The next coordination pulse was 40 seconds away. 30, 20. The Kreshnar pressed harder, sensing humanity's desperation. Ships were dying now, human and Valen both. The orbital space around Valen Prime was becoming a graveyard. Fire, Hyunwoo shouted. The disruption weapons released their payload, invisible waves of energy that crashed into the Kreshnar bioships. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the swarm simply stopped. The millions of organisms hung motionless in space, their connection to the hive mind temporarily severed. All ships forward. Maximum thrust, Hyunwoo commanded. The human fleet surged through the gap, racing toward the planet. Behind them, the Kreshnar began to recover, their coordination returning. But it was too late. The humans had broken through and joined with the scattered Valen defenders. A new face appeared on Hyunwoo's screen. The Valen warrior wore ceremonial armor despite the battle, marking him as someone of high rank. I am War Shepherd Krelvan, commander of Valen Prime's defense. I must admit, humans, I did not expect you. I did not think anyone would come to our aid. Thaldarin came to ours, Hyunwoo said simply. Now let's coordinate our forces and show these creatures what happens when humans and Valen fight together. The combined fleet took up new positions around the planet. The Valen ships, though battered, still packed tremendous firepower. The human ships were more nimble and carried the disruption technology the Kreshnar had never encountered before. Together they began to turn the tide. But the real battle was on the planet's surface. The Kreshnar had already landed siege nodes, massive organic structures that were drilling into the planet's crust. If they reached the core, they would consume Valen Prime from the inside out. Commander Nam Jiwon led the ground assault. She commanded a mixed force of human marines and Valen warriors, the first time the two species had fought side by side. Her dropship plunged through the atmosphere under heavy fire, rattling and shaking as Kreshnar organisms tried to tear it apart. 30 seconds to landing. The pilot shouted over the noise. Jiwon checked her weapon one last time. Around her, Marines and Valen warriors did the same. Despite their differences, they all wore the same expression now. Determination, fear, but also something else. Purpose. The dropship crashed into the ground near the largest siege node. The doors blew open and the assault force poured out into a nightmare. The Kreshnar had transformed the landing zone into something alien and horrifying. The ground itself seemed alive, pulsing with organic growth. The air smelled of rot and chemicals. Move, move, move! Jiwon shouted, leading her troops toward the siege node. It towered above them, a mass of flesh and metal that reached into the sky. Tendrils extended from its base, burrowing into the planet. They could feel the vibrations through their boots as it drilled deeper. Kreshnar ground organisms emerged from the corruption, things that looked like insects mixed with machines. They were fast and deadly, armed with razor limbs and acid spray. The fighting was brutal and close. Humans and Valen fought back to back, covering each other, learning each other's tactics on the fly. Medical officer needed at position 3. Someone screamed over the radio. Choi Yuna was already running. She had set up a field hospital behind the front lines, treating casualties from both species. The wounded came in a steady stream, carried by their comrades. Valen warriors with shattered armor and broken bones. Human marines with chemical burns and missing limbs. Hold still, Yuna told a Valen soldier as she worked to seal a massive wound in his side. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency despite the chaos around her. You're going to make it. Stay with me. The Valen's golden eyes focused on her face. You're human. Why are you here? Why are you saving me? Because someone once saved us, Yuna said simply, injecting him with pain medication. Because that's what we do. Now rest. I've got others to help. Back at the siege node, Commander Jiwon had reached the base. Her engineers were setting up charges, but the Kreshnar were adapting. More organisms poured from the structure, defending it with suicidal determination. We need more time, one of the engineers shouted. Then we'll buy it, Chi-Wan responded. She positioned her troops in a defensive circle around the engineers. Nobody gets through. Hold the line. The line held. Barely. Humans and Valen fought with everything they had, using bullets, energy weapons, and when those ran out, knives and bare hands. The ground became slick with blood and Kreshnar fluid. Soldiers fell, but others took their places. Finally, the lead engineer gave the signal. Charge is set. 30 seconds. Fall back, G1 ordered. Everyone move. The assault force retreated as fast as they could. Behind them, the charges detonated in a chain reaction that climbed up the siege node. The structure shuddered, cracked, and began to collapse. The Kreshnar organisms connected to it convulsed and died as the hive mind node was destroyed. Across the planet, other teams reported similar successes. The siege nodes were falling. The Kreshnar's foothold on Valen Prime was being eliminated. In orbit, Captain Dabin had identified a critical weakness. She had been studying the Kreshnar Queenship, the massive biovessel that coordinated the entire swarm in this system. It was the most heavily defended target, but she had noticed something. During the coordination pulses, when it was synchronizing all the other Kreshnar organisms, it lowered its own defenses slightly. It's a small window, she told Admiral Hyunwoo. Maybe 2 seconds. But if we can hit it with everything we have during that window, we might destroy it. And if we fail, Hyunwoo asked, then we die. But we're dying anyway. At least this way we have a chance. Hyunwoo looked at the tactical display. The battle was still in doubt. The Kreshnar were incredibly resilient, adapting to every tactic the combined fleet used. But if they could destroy the Queenship, the entire swarm in this system would lose coordination. It might be enough to win. Do it, he ordered. Captain Dabin, take your ship and whatever vessels can keep up with you. Hit that Queenship with everything you've got. The rest of us will cover your approach. Dabin smiled grimly. Understood, Admiral. It's been an honor serving with you. She cut the connection before he could respond. There was no time for sentiment now. She turned to her crew, seeing the fear and determination in their faces. You all know what we're about to do. The Queenship is heavily defended. We probably won't survive, but if we succeed, we save this world. We save the Valen. We prove that Thalrin was right to spare us all those years ago. So I'm asking you now one last time, are you with me? The response was immediate and unanimous. Every crew member of Thalrin's gift was with her. They had volunteered for this mission, knowing it might be one way. They believed in the debt. They believed in repaying mercy with mercy. Then let's show the galaxy what humanity is made of, Dabin said. All power to engines. Plot intercept course for the Queenship. And someone play some music. If we're going to die, we might as well die to a good soundtrack. Thalrin's gift, along with 12 other human vessels, broke formation and accelerated toward the Queenship. Part 4. The monument 10 years had passed since the Battle of Valen Prime. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody could have predicted. Ambassador. Oh Sumin stood in her quarters on the diplomatic station orbiting Valen Prime, preparing for the ceremony. She was 50 years old, one of humanity's most respected diplomats, and today she would witness something unprecedented in galactic history. She adjusted her formal robes, decorated with both Earth and Valen symbols, and took a deep breath. The cost of that battle still hurt to think about. 47 human ships destroyed, 8,000 crew members dead, including Captain Cho Dabin, who had become a legend. The Valen had lost even more. But they had won. The Kreshnar swarm had been driven back, scattered, and eventually destroyed by a coalition of species who had finally united against the common threat. More importantly, something had changed in how species viewed each other. The story of humanity's intervention had spread across the galaxy like fire. Other civilizations watched in confusion and wonder. The humans had risked extinction to save an empire that had once considered destroying them. It made no sense by the cold logic of galactic politics, and that was exactly why it mattered. Ambassador, they're ready for you, her assistant said. Suman nodded and left her quarters. Outside, a Valen honor guard waited to escort her. They saluted with fists over hearts, a gesture of deep respect. She returned the salute and followed them through the station. The transport ship that carried them to the surface was beautiful, designed by both human and Valen engineers working together. Over the past decade, the two species had become more than allies. They had become friends, partners, something the galaxy had rarely seen between such different peoples. As they descended through Valen Prime's atmosphere, Suman could see the repairs and reconstruction. The planet had been badly damaged during the siege, but now it was healing. New cities rose from the ruins. Forests grew where corruption had once spread. The Valen were survivors, and they had not forgotten who had helped them survive. The transport landed at the ceremonial grounds outside the capital city. When Suman stepped out, she gasped, despite having seen images of it. Nothing could have prepared her for the reality. The monument of Thalrin rose before her like a mountain made of crystal. It was easily 500 feet tall, carved from a single massive crystal that the Valen had grown specifically for this purpose. The crystal caught the light of Valen Prime's sun and scattered it into rainbow patterns that painted the ground in colors. But the size wasn't what took her breath away. It was the names. Every surface of the monument was covered in names, carved so precisely that they seemed to float in the crystal. 8,000 names. Every human who had died defending Valen Prime. From Captain Chodabin at the top to the youngest crew member at the bottom. Each name written in both human and Valen script, each one honored equally. And at the very peak of the monument, visible even from orbit, were the words Thalrin had spoken 75 years ago. Grow strong, young ones. The galaxy is not kind. Thousands of Valen had gathered for the dedication ceremony, but Suman also saw representatives from dozens of other species. The monument had become more than a memorial. It had become a symbol, a statement about what was possible when mercy and gratitude replaced fear and conquest. War Shepherd Krelvan, now Supreme Commander of the Valen military, approached Suman. He was old now, his blue skin darker with age, but his golden eyes were still sharp. Ambassador Suman, welcome. We are honored by your presence. The honor is mine, Commander, Suman replied. This monument is beyond words. Words are insufficient for what your people did, Krelvan said quietly. You came when nobody else would. You sacrificed when you had no obligation to do so. You repaid a 75-year-old debt that most species would have forgotten. This monument is the least we can offer. An elderly Valen approached them, moving slowly with the aid of a walking staff. Her ceremonial robes marked her as a historian, one of the keepers of Valen memory and culture. Krelvan bowed deeply to her, and Suman followed his lead. This is Elder Historian Velrane, Krelvan said. She has something important to share with you, Ambassador. Velrane studied Suman with ancient eyes. Walk with me, young human. There is something you should know about Thalrin. They walked slowly around the base of the monument, the historian leaning on Suman's arm. Other Valen maintained a respectful distance, giving them privacy. You know that Thalrin spared your people, Velrane said. You know he gave them star charts and safe passage home. But do you know what happened to him after? Suman shook her head. We've tried to find out, but records were scarce. Because he was erased, Velrane said bluntly. When his superiors learned what he had done, they were furious. He had violated the most fundamental law of the Valen Empire. Young species must be eliminated before they become threats. He was stripped of his rank, his honors, his family name. Everything he had earned in 200 years of service was taken away. Suman felt her chest tighten. What happened to him? He was exiled to a remote colony world. He lived there for 15 years, alone and dishonored, before he died. His grave was unmarked. His name was forbidden to be spoken in the Empire. As far as the Valen were concerned, he had never existed. Velrane stopped walking and looked up at the monument. But he was right and we were wrong. His mercy saved us all. Without it, you would not have existed to save us. So now we honor him as we should have honored him in life. The old historian led Suman to a specific spot at the monument's base. There, carved larger than any other name, was War Shepherd Thalrin, who chose mercy over duty, and in doing so, saved 2 civilizations. Suman felt tears running down her face. She wasn't ashamed of them. Where is his grave? I would like to pay my respects. We brought his remains here, Velrane said softly. They rest at the heart of this monument. He is home now, surrounded by the names of those who proved his mercy was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. The dedication ceremony began shortly after. Supreme Commander Krelvan spoke first, his voice amplified so all could hear. Today we honor those who died defending our world, but more than that, we honor the bond between humans and Valen. a bond forged in mercy and sealed in sacrifice. Ambassador Suman spoke next, representing humanity. "My grandfather served on the Prometheus Dawn," she said, her voice steady despite her emotions. "He was there when Thalaran spared them. He spent his entire life telling that story, making sure we never forgot. Today, looking at this monument, I know we never will. The Valen gave us life. We gave them life in return. And together we have shown the galaxy that there is another way." But the most important speech came from an unexpected source. A young Valen, barely into adulthood, stepped forward. His name was Telvrin, and he was the youngest survivor of the siege. "I was a child during the battle," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "I remember hiding in the shelters, hearing the weapons fire, feeling the ground shake as the siege nodes drilled into our planet. I remember thinking we were all going to die. Then the humans came, species we had barely heard of, whose technology was inferior to ours, whose numbers were small. They came anyway. They fought for us. They died for us." He looked up at the monument, at all those names carved in crystal. "I am alive because humans decided that an old debt mattered more than their own safety. Because they valued honor over survival. I will spend my entire life trying to be worthy of that gift. And I will tell my children, and they will tell their children, the story of Thalaran and the humans who remembered him. This story will never die." As he spoke, something remarkable happened. Representatives from other species began to step forward. A delegate from the Tavarans, an ambassador from the Helix Collective, even a representative from the distant Morian Union, who had never shown interest in this sector before. One by one, they spoke. They talked about how the story of Thalaran and humanity had changed how they viewed interspecies relations, how it had inspired them to reconsider old hatreds and ancient feuds, how it had shown them that loyalty and gratitude could be as powerful as any weapon. "We are establishing something new," announced the Tavaran delegate. "The Thalaran Accords, a framework for cooperation based on mutual defense and shared resources. Not conquest, not domination. Partnership built on the principles that this monument represents." Suman watched as more and more species pledged to join. Within hours, what had started as a memorial ceremony had become the foundation of a new galactic order. Species that had been enemies for millennia were talking about peace. Ancient grudges were being set aside, all because of a story about mercy and the determination to repay it. As the sun set over Valen Prime, the monument caught the light and seemed to glow from within. Suman stood before it, reading the names of the fallen. She found Captain Chodabin's name near the top and placed her hand against the crystal. "You did it," she whispered. "You proved that humanity's promise was worth keeping, that Thalaran's mercy meant something. Rest well, Captain. Your sacrifice changed everything." Elder historian Velraini approached her again. "This monument will stand for thousands of years," she said. "Long after you and I are dust, people will come here. They will see these names." Part 5. The name made immortal 50 years after the dedication of the monument. The galaxy faced a new crisis. President Bayek Minho stood in the Situation Room deep beneath Earth's capital, staring at the tactical displays with growing concern. He was 72 years old, a veteran of the diplomatic corps who had spent decades building on the foundation laid by the Thalaran Accords. Now all of that work was threatened. "The Telan hierarchy has issued their ultimatum," reported his chief advisor. "They demand we dissolve our alliance with the Valen within 30 days, or they will consider it an act of war." Minho studied the display showing Talon space and their allies. The hierarchy was powerful, perhaps even more powerful than the Valen had been at their height. They commanded dozens of subject species and controlled vast territories, and they were terrified of what humanity and the Valen had built together. "They call our loyalty irrational," Minho said quietly. "They say we've destabilized galactic order by valuing friendship over pragmatic self-interest. They want us to return to the old ways where every species looks out only for itself. What are we going to do, Mr. President?" Minho thought about the monument of Thalaran, which he had visited many times. He thought about the 8,000 names carved in crystal. He thought about a warrior who chose mercy when he could have chosen destruction, and a species that never forgot that mercy. "Send them our response," he said. "Tell them that humanity does not abandon its friends. Tell them that the bonds we've built with the Valen are not political convenience but matters of honor. And tell them that if they want war, they will get war." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. The Telon hierarchy was immensely powerful. This could be the end of everything humanity had built. But Minho knew there was no other choice. Humanity had defined itself by keeping faith with the Valen. To break that faith now, under threat, would be to destroy everything they had become. On Valen Prime, Supreme Guardian Ralseth received the same ultimatum. He was young for his position, only 90 years old, but he had earned his rank through wisdom and courage. He stood in the rebuilt chambers of Valen leadership, surrounded by advisors who argued for caution. "We should consider the Talon demands," one advisor said. "The humans have repaid their debt many times over. We cannot ask them to face extinction for our sake." "The humans are not asking our permission," Ralseth said firmly. "They have already refused. The question is not what we can ask of them, but what we owe them in return. They saved us once. Now it is our turn again. But the Telon hierarchy is too strong. We cannot win this war." "Perhaps," Ralseth acknowledged. "But we will fight it anyway, because that is what Thalrin would have done. That is what honor demands." The war began exactly 30 days later. The Telon hierarchy struck first, hitting human and Valen colonies simultaneously across a dozen systems. Their fleets were massive, their weapons devastating. In the first week alone, 3 human worlds went dark and 2 Valen outposts were destroyed. But something unexpected happened. Other species began to declare their support for humanity and the Valen. The Tavarans, who had once been neutral, sent their fleets to join the defense. The Helix Collective opened their shipyards to human and Valen vessels. Even the distant Morian Union, who had never involved themselves in local conflicts, sent supplies and medical aid. Fleet Commander Jin Seo-hyun found herself commanding the most diverse fleet in galactic history. At 55 years old, she had risen through the ranks during the decades of peace, never expecting to lead in war. But now she stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking at tactical displays showing ships from 17 different species, all flying together under the banner of the Thalren Accords. "This is incredible," her tactical officer said. "They're coming from everywhere. Species we've barely met are sending help." "They're not coming for strategic advantage," Seo-hyun said, understanding something profound. "They're coming because of the story, because they believe in what it represents." She was right. Across the galaxy, the tale of Thalren's mercy and humanity's loyalty had become legendary. It had been told and retold, adapted into songs and stories, taught to children of 100 different species. It represented an ideal that many had thought impossible, that loyalty and honor could matter more than power and self-interest. The war raged for 3 years. The battles were fierce, the casualties enormous on both sides, but the Thalren Alliance, as it came to be called, held together in ways the Telon hierarchy could not understand. When hierarchy forces destroyed a human colony, Valen fleets would appear to exact vengeance. When Valen worlds were attacked, humans would arrive to help defend them. And always other species would follow, inspired by the bond they witnessed. The turning point came at the Thalren Nebula, a region of space that had been renamed years earlier in honor of the warrior who started everything. It was here that the Telon hierarchy committed their main fleet, intending to break the alliance once and for all. Fleet Commander Seo-hyun faced an impossible decision. The Telon fleet outnumbered hers 2-1, and they held the advantageous position. Every tactical analysis said she should retreat, preserve her forces, fight another day. But she looked at the diverse species represented in her fleet. She thought about what they were fighting for, and she remembered the words carved on the monument. "Grow strong, young ones." They had grown strong. Not just in ships and weapons, but in bonds and trust. "All ships," she transmitted across every frequency. "Today we fight not for territory or resources. We fight for the idea that mercy matters, that loyalty matters, that bonds between species can be stronger than fear. Today we prove that Thalren was right to spare humanity, and humanity was right to save the Valen. Today we show the galaxy what we've become. For Thalren, for honor, for each other." The response was deafening. Ships from 17 species responded as one, their battle cries mixing together in a chorus of determination. They charged forward into overwhelming odds, not as separate fleets but as one unified force. The Battle of Thalren Nebula lasted 14 hours. It was brutal and costly. Ships from every species were destroyed, but the Alliance fought with a coordination and determination the hierarchy could not match. They covered each other's weaknesses, supported each other's strengths, and refused to abandon any wounded vessel. When a human carrier was disabled, 3 Valen cruisers formed a protective screen around it while repairs were made. When Teveran fighters ran out of ammunition, human ships shared their own supplies. When Helix ships had their shields collapse, Morian vessels moved to cover them. It was this unity that won the battle. The Telon hierarchy had superior numbers and technology, but they fought as individuals seeking glory and advantage. The Alliance fought as brothers and sisters, willing to die for each other, and that made all the difference. The hierarchy fleet broke first. Their formation collapsed as ships began to retreat independently, each captain making their own decision to flee. The Alliance pursued, not with vengeance but with measured force, accepting surrenders and offering mercy to those who asked for it. Supreme Commander of the Telon hierarchy's forces transmitted his surrender directly to Fleet Commander Seo-hyun. "I do not understand you," he said, his alien features showing confusion. "You had us beaten. You could have destroyed my entire fleet. Why do you offer mercy?" Seo-hyun smiled. "Because we learned from the best. Someone once showed mercy to humanity when they could have destroyed us. We're just paying it forward." The war ended 3 months later with the Treaty of Thalren, signed aboard a neutral station. The Telon hierarchy acknowledged the right of species to form alliances based on loyalty rather than just strategic interest. More importantly, they joined the Thalren Accords themselves, inspired by what they had witnessed. The galactic order had fundamentally changed. The old ways of isolated species competing for dominance were giving way to something new: cooperation, mutual defense, and bonds built on trust rather than fear. 20 years after the war ended, Curator Lim Hana prepared the newest exhibit at the Museum of First Contact on Earth. She was 35 years old and had grown up on the stories of Thalren. Now she had the honor of sharing those stories with the next generation. The exhibit centered on a hologram of that first meeting in 2157. Visitors could watch. Captain Han Junho faced the Valen warship, hear Dr. Kang Mirai's desperate attempts at communication, and witness the moment when Thalren made his fateful choice. But the exhibit didn't end there. It continued through the decades, showing humanity's growth, the crisis of the Valen, the battle for Valen Prime, the monument, and finally the war that had proved the strength of the bonds they had built. Children from dozens of species came through the museum every day. Hana loved watching their faces as they experienced the story. Human children saw where their civilization came from. Valen children learned about the warrior who saved them twice, first by sparing humanity, then by inspiring them to save the Valen. Children from other species saw proof that cooperation was possible, that mercy was strength, that loyalty mattered. "Why did Thalren save the humans?" a young visitor asked Hana one day.